Start today's show with Sir Keir Starmer's first foreign trip since he became Prime Minister. And the big question is, can we trust the Labour Party to keep the special relationship alive? Well, Sir Keir's at the NATO summit in Washington, where he said the bond between the UK and the US is stronger than ever. But Donald Trump is looking more and more likely to become the next US president again. And Labour's Foreign Secretary, David Lamy, once called Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. And Mr Lamy has softened his tone on Trump recently, but could a Labour government and Donald Trump work together? Well, let's cross live now to Washington DC and speak to our political editor, Chris Hope, who was with the Prime Minister on this historic first trip. Chris, welcome to the show. So give us an idea of the mood within the NATO summit camp. You were with the Prime Minister earlier. Seems to be going rather well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's no better time to come to a summit on the back of a landslide victory. He's the shiniest ornament on display at this NATO summit because of his huge victory last week in the general election, and everyone wants to get to talk to him. Emmanuel Macron gave him a good bro handshake. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer is here getting ready for a big event in Blenheim Palace. 44 European leaders coming there to the UK. He's hosting. They'll talk about small boats next week and also probably about how to get closer ties with the European Union. And we heard yesterday from Joe Biden, who had a meeting in the Oval Office here in Washington in the White House with Sir Keir Starmer. He made very clear how he views a special relationship is like a knot tying the transatlantic alliance together the closer we are with Europe. So clearly for the Biden White House, the closer we get to the European Union, the better it is for America. Now, some people who voted for Brexit may not want that to happen, Martin, I can tell you that. But last night in the Oval Office, I, as a journalist, had my first moment going into the Oval Office, and I actually asked the President of the United States a question on behalf of GB News viewers. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Trying.
Do you watch the soccer, Mr. President? Do you watch the soccer?
By the way, I heard.
It's good news.
Good news is right. I tell you what, that's all because of the Prime Minister.
I lost a game onto the Labour government.
Is football coming home, Prime Minister?
It looks like it.
There you had Joe Biden there saying it's good news. It's because of the Prime Minister, Martin. It does seem that the sun is shining in Washington and it's shining on Sir Keir Starmer. Nothing is really going wrong. I mean, he was reflecting to us on the flight over here that a week ago he was in a bed and breakfast somewhere in the East Midlands, and then last night he was on the balcony at the White House with his wife Victoria, soaking up the adulation of world leaders. It won't get any better for him, I think, because I think going forward there's all sorts of problems emerging in the prison system and elsewhere, and those are the challenges he's facing because politics is a choice. And when he starts to decide to release prisoners early, and if any harm comes to people because of that, it's on him. But right now, he's in a very, very happy place, Sir Keir Starmer. Of course, also travelling with Sir Keir Starmer is David Lamy. He's, of course, the Foreign Secretary. He's having to go over some of his language in the past about Donald Trump, which is somewhat embarrassing. You mentioned there about him calling Donald Trump a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. That was in 2018. But in 2021, David Lamy called Trump an enemy of democracy. And the same year, he said that his entire presidency is built on recklessness, narcissism and delusion. And then also the same year, he said that Trump deserved to be impeached. Now, you can say those things in opposition, but when you become the Foreign Secretary, it's very undiplomatic language to say about what a guy who could be the new president, according to the polls, in November. I mean, for him, David Lamy's position, he thinks that back in the day, everyone was rude about Donald Trump, but that isn't quite the case. I mean, if you say these things, you've got to try and work a way around that. We had Nigel Farage told GB News last week that he had helped to engineer Trump talking to Lamy insiders and the like, or Trump's team talking to Lamy insiders. But it certainly is an issue, I think, going forward for the UK and US relations if Trump wins.
And Chris, I'll let you off using the word soccer because you were talking to an American. That one I'll let you off with. But on a serious point, as you say, it's okay in opposition laying into Donald Trump. And at the moment, that is a very Starmer-friendly set of leaders you're talking about. Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor, the Swedish Prime Minister, Joe Biden himself. They're very of the same mindset, but politics is a movable feast. And if Donald Trump gets in, which is looking increasingly likely, I guess the question is, do you think those questions, those comments that David Lamy mentioned in the past might come back to haunt him?
I think they might, and that's a worry. I think, though, to be talking to people here about Donald Trump, close observers of his team, all this language kind of bounces off his back, his rhino hide back, a bit like Nigel Farage. I don't think he takes any of this stuff too seriously. Basically, anyone on the left has a go at Trump. It's what they do. So David Lamy is no different. But that language is a problem, I think, and particularly somebody who is now our chief diplomat on the world stage. Yeah, I mean, the Canadian President Trudeau is meeting very shortly with Sir Keir Starmer, and we'll be observing that for GB News viewers. But there's no question, for people on the left of politics, Starmer's victory last week is an antidote to this populism that they see across the world, notably on the European continent. So they can look at Starmer and say all is not lost for the centre ground, the left, because in continental Europe, the right is making advances, and that's worrying people like Emmanuel Macron and the like.
Thank you there, Chris Hope, live from Washington, D.C.